So I guess before I start, how many people are familiar with source maps? Like you've heard of them before? Okay? Left side of the room, strong bias. And then how many people have an idea of like what's inside them, like how they work? Or I should just have Justin do this talk. Okay. So that's perfect. That's like what this talk is for. So that's great to hear. Not for you all, but for you all, that's perfect. So cool. So the agenda here will be a little bit of a history of source maps, the anatomy of a source map, what's inside them, how they work, like what information you do have access to and what you don't have access to, and then a little bit of like how these tools work together. So like if you're in your browser and you stop at a breakpoint, how does that work? And like how does it link back to the original code? Things like that. So hopefully that'll give a quick kind of get up to speed on it. And then we'll talk about some new proposals that are coming in the future. And yeah, afterwards, if people want to speak about source maps at the event or give me feedback on the proposals or get involved, I would love that. Cool. So yeah, like I said, John Cooperman, work at Bloomberg, work on this source map task group, which is underneath TC39. So when were source maps created? So a long time ago, like all the way up until the early 2000s, it was pretty common that the code that you write was the actual code that you deploy to production, and it was just identical. And then over time, people, especially Google, but other companies started building these really big applications with lots of teams and lots of files and lots of code. And so because of that, they started coming up with ways to like bundle the code together or like run a compiler on it and make it a little smaller, remove unused functions, things like that. And so in 2009, with kind of the release of Gmail and Google Docs, Google Maps, things like that, they came up with this suite of tools called closure tools. Has anybody heard of like Google Closure Compiler? It's still kind of around. Less on the side. Okay, cool. But yeah, so some of these closure tools are still around and driving. But it sort of marked this age of like going from a simple like single JavaScript file to like maybe having a really big team shipping lots of files that all went through some process together. So why do we need source maps? So we've come a very far away from that single file. We have lots of examples, like we have big web apps, which probably a lot of people have worked on, where you just have a ton of files. Maybe they're written in another language, and then you kind of bundle them together. We also, more and more these days, with the popularity rising for WebAssembly, we have like native apps that were never written in JavaScript at all. Maybe they were written in C++ or Rust, and they're compiled to WebAssembly and then deployed to the web. But even for our kind of more like common web app stacks, we have all these different languages like Sass, TypeScript. We use different tools, different compilers like Cursor to kind of make your bundle size smaller. And then we put them all through these bundlers like Webpack or ESBuild or things like that. And they spit out some JavaScript. And we've gotten really far if you think about it. Like if you have a big web application, the thing that actually gets like deployed to your user is like pretty different than the thing that you author in a lot of ways. And so what are source maps? They're JSON objects, so they're human readable for the most part. They help you link between that generated code and your source files. So kind of if you imagine you write 2 TypeScript files, you run a bunch of tooling on it, and then you deploy one JavaScript file, the source map will help link points in the JavaScript file back to your original plain TypeScript file. And that applies for like the WebAssembly and the C++, all of that stuff. They're kind of like a way to be like, if I'm stopped here, what was the original code that generated this? So they're not created by individuals, handwritten for the most part. They're created by the tools that you use. So if you use like SWC or ESBuild, Webpack, things like that, those are the tools that as they go along, they create the source map. And then they're used by what we've been referring to as consumers, which is like your debugging tool when you actually stop at a breakpoint. So maybe Chrome or Firefox or an external tool like Replay. And they pick up the information. They also get used by some of these really cool error monitoring tools. Sentry is an example, which can help you like detect user errors, and then they'll use the source map to tell you which line of your original code the user error came from. So this is an example of a source map. Can people see that okay in the back? Basically, yeah, it's a JSON file. It's got a few of these fields in it. The first field is the version field, which is always 3, and we don't need to talk about why, it's just 3. The second is a list of files, so the actual source files, so whether that's C++ or Rust or JavaScript, TypeScript, whatever it is. The next one is optional, but a lot of times instead of just listing the files, we'll go through and actually pull the content of each file and like have it the total content. So you can see like index.js and its content was that function greet. And if you had a second file, you'd have a second content. And then the non-human readable part is the mappings. These are quite confusing. We're not going to go too deep into them, but we'll go deep enough that you'll have some idea of what all this stuff that looks like it's screaming at you is. Cool. So how do these work? So let's imagine you're creating a program and you have this function called add. And add takes two numbers or any type and returns the first one plus the second one. And then you have another file and you import add and then you call it. And then maybe because you're working on this, you add a debugger. So fairly straightforward. You've got these two files and you've got a debug statement. So if you were to pipe that through some build system, and we'll get into the configuration later, you would see that you would get like all that. And again, like kind of compilers have come through and they've like wrapped it in an IFI and they've minified a bunch of things. But then you can notice at the bottom, there's this little comment. And a little comment says the source mapping URL is this bundle.js.map. And if we look at that, then we can see what we'd expect to see, which is another one of these JSON things with the version. It's got the two sources. I'll share these slides afterwards, but you can see that the like code in the sources content was the code that we wrote in the original files. Then it's got a bunch of mappings. It's got this new field, which we'll talk about in a little bit, names, but those are the actual like function and variable names, basically. Cool. So real quick on these mappings, which we're not going to go too deep into, but each little chunk of mapping, like we see here, you know, each one of these things here, basically is that's kind of the thing that we use here. So it's like we take the generated file and we split it into these like tokens. And then for each token, we grab its line and column number, and then we map it to a line and column in the original file. And the one other thing we need is out of that, I'm still blue, but I did, okay. Out of that list of sources that we had back here, which file it is. So basically we're like saying, let's take an example here. This might be hard to read, but we're saying like, okay, well, AAAA is the mapping we see. So we're saying for the 00 of the generated file, find the 0th list of files, and then find the 00 of the source file. And these can get a lot more complex, but essentially it's just a single point in the generated file, the index of which source file it came from, and then a single point in the source file. That's like kind of what they are. So when you're stopped somewhere in your dev tools, like you're stopped, 30, 60 or something like that in the third file, then the browser knows to look up the third file, find 30, 60, that kind of thing. And that helps you kind of map back and forth. There's quite a bit more to these, but that's the basic idea. Cool. So now how do these debuggers work? So let's just start a new example. We've got our add function, but this time we have a debugger right inside the add function. And we've got this multiply function. It does some multiplication. And we have a new index file with add and multiply, and then it calls both of them. And so for this one, let's just use ESBuild, but these are the same with every SWC Babel. Like
your presentation is stopped in YouTube. Present. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. I'll give it a minute. Make sure people can see the.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. So we've got these files. This is unimportant. It's just the idea that we're using some bundler. Like we all use like the TypeScript compiler, ESBuild, Webpack, something like that. And so then it'll generate this single file with all this minified code in it. And then you can see the debugger statement in it. So if you open it up in a dev tool, then you would get paused in this dev tool. And this is going back to the original point of like, why do we need source maps? The thing is that you'll be stopped somewhere that's really useless to you, right? Like it's stopped in the function O, and O takes R and T, and you really have no idea how to find this in the source code, right? Like it's wrapped in an IFI. It doesn't look anything like your original code. Things have been inline. So we'll go back to any of these tools, and they all have a similar flag, and we'll just add source map true, basically saying, okay, when you generate this code, when you build it all together, generate a source map. So here we can see the same block of code, but now that comment's back, right? And the comment says, here's the source mapping URL. We can look in here and we'll see something very similar. We've got these 3 files. They've got the source content. They've got some mappings and a list of the names. And now it's really nice. Oh, sorry, that's too small. But now it's really nice when we're stopped at the debugger, it says that we're in the correct function, which is add. It has the variable names, first and second, things like that. So does that kind of make sense? So we've got basically, we tell the bundler to make this mapping, and then it's kind of like a dance between, in this case, ESBuild makes the map, and then Chrome reads the map. And that's kind of the relationship that they have here. Great, so that's how that goes in. So there's this other section in the DevTools, right? Like, have you all used this? It's like the scope or breakpoints or watch. It's got all this stuff on the right sidebar. And so this is nowhere to be found in the source map, right? Like this is not there. We saw what's in the source map, which is a list of the actual source code and some mappings. So how do these DevTools figure out like what's in the lexical scope or what's in the global? Like how do they figure that out? And the answer will scare you. So basically, it's never been standardized. Like it's very different between the different tools. So Chrome DevTools uses these really complex regular expressions. They try to figure out like where you stopped and where there's a curly bracket and try to like figure out things that were made inside there. Firefox takes your source files and runs Babel on them and turns it into a fully parsed program and uses that. So basically, all of this information about scopes and where functions came from is really hard to implement, and it can often cause differences between different browsers or different debuggers. Stack traces are also a problem. Have you all seen this before, where you're working on your app and you get an error, and the error is like, the error happened in the function n at r at t, like it's completely useless, right? You can't get back, and if you click on the file, it just takes you to the big minified file. So a lot of things can be done through this kind of trickery, but a lot of things can't be done. So Bloomberg years ago came up with this idea called pasta source maps. And the idea here is back into that source map, we add a new field, which is like XCOM Bloomberg. Don't memorize this, it's going away. But basically this list of these function mappings. And so then in there, we'll stick all of these different things. And you can see we go from what we had before, which is that RON. Now we can go ahead and actually reclaim all of the function names. So we can get like penne, spaghetti, orzo, things like that. And we use this internally with a lot of success. It's really great so that in all of our stack traces, we can actually see the original function and file names. And so this was kind of a thing that we started thinking on for new features. A lot of other people had implemented similar things. But before we go into the solutions, I wanted to mention it's not just as simple as names, because I think if it were just like function names and variable names, it'd be really easy to kind of recreate this stuff. But think of these examples where you use like all these optimizing compilers. Like a lot of people, even if you don't use something like Cursor, you probably use it indirectly, some other tool you're working on. So you've got all these functions and they all call each other. And Cursor will see that and it'll say, oh, I know what to do here. I can just like get rid of all those functions and just inline the whole thing. Or like maybe you have two variables and it just combines them because it knows that it can. So in these situations, it gets very impossible to reconstruct the original source file. There's just no information there about it, how it came to be. Another problem that we've had, because we have all these great ideas, a lot of people in the community at different big companies have these ideas, is it gets really difficult to move forward. There's been historically no standards body or group meeting about it. And so people come up with the same idea, like we need a way to ignore files. Like when you're stepping through, you don't want to stop in like react.js or something like that. Like, that's library code. You don't want to be in there. So how do we do that? And so Google came up with this way, again, with this like X prefix thing, ignore list, and they put their name in it, which is totally fair. We put our name in ours. And then Firefox was like, oh, we kind of want that too, but we don't really want to have a Firefox one as well. So we'll just use the Google one. So then Firefox uses X Google as their prefix. It gets like really weird and really messy. And so this has kind of been the thing that led us to create this group. So what we did is we formed a task group underneath TC39. So we're TG4, task group 4. We took the kind of like Google Doc that was the specification, and we've been really working to improve it. So the way that we've been doing it is we've been reading through all the different consumers and all the different generators and meeting with everybody that owns these cool open source repos and trying to just like write down the state of the world, basically. Like not trying to make big changes right away, but trying to just see what does everybody do? Can we get it written down so that it would be pretty easy to understand what all the different browsers and all the different generators do? Our big new feature has been this kind of scope information. We want to improve that right sidebar. We want to improve stack traces so it's very easy to like reconstruct source files from these minified or language changed apps. We've got a bunch of other proposals, which I'll cover briefly, which are like debug IDs and range mappings, basically ways to make smaller source maps that have just as much information, or ways to help tools like Sentry keep track of exactly which source file the error ID came from. So the scopes proposal, these are kind of the high level things that we're trying to accomplish. We want to be able to detect inline functions when functions get taken out by a tool and reconstruct them back in the source map. So our Terser example, where we had 3 functions all calling each other, Terser turned it into just one inline. If you were to put a breakpoint there, it would be nice if it could reconstruct that you had 3 functions there. All the variable mapping, so map any renamed or erased variables back to their original name. Scope reconstruction, so basically instead of using these regular expressions or parsing the whole file, we want to be able to rebuild the original scope from the source file. And in order to do this, we're adding 2 new fields to the source map specification, which is a list of the original scopes, it's like a nested tree, and a list of the generated ranges. And so then these generated ranges can map back to original scopes, and we should be able to reconstruct anything that a compiler could do to a file. Debug IDs is another example, so it'd be cool if it lost it again.
Yeah. I don't know why.
Is it showing again?
Yes. Okay.
Perfect. So with debug IDs, this is a problem that mostly is only had by these tools.
So if you ended your full screen mode and then
Oh, it went back again. So now it's not showing?
Yeah, it's okay.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, basically these tools, these error monitoring tools, where they are looking at the line that errored in your generated code and mapping it back, except you're deploying multiple times a day. And so they might map it back to the source file of a wrong deploy version, something like that. So this would be a really nice tool that would help them, where you could add a debug ID to the source map. And then the tricky part is the browser would somehow be able to tell you which debug ID this error came from. So this is something that is a work in progress. We'll need to work with other organization committees like the What Working Group for something like this. And range mappings is another one. We often do these multi-step conversions from TypeScript to JavaScript and then run it through an optimizing compiler. And it can get really tricky to do this. Either information can get lost, or for it not to get lost, you have to make these really verbose source maps. Basically, any token that isn't shared at every step of the way will kind of be omitted. You can read more about this if you'd like to. I think it's really interesting, but I don't want to take a ton of time with it. So we've got all these great proposals up and coming. Current participants from a bunch of big companies, Bloomberg, Google, JetBrains, a bunch of others. And we also have a lot of invited experts, so people that are not affiliated with a TC39 member, but are interested in contributing to this. Is a really great way to get involved. We've got a ton of stuff going on, whether it's tests or writing specification text, or just weighing in on features or helping us triage issues, things like that. So yeah, that's what I have. We do everything out in the open. So we've got this GitHub repo, TC39/source map. And on the GitHub repo, there's a contributing guide. So if anybody wants to get involved, you can come find us on Matrix and see all the stuff that we're up to. Cool. Thank you very much.
Everybody can join on Matrix in TC39 Matrix.
Yeah, so basically we've got multiple kind of ways that you can be affiliated with TC39. But yeah, if you go for the source maps work, if you go to the source maps repo, yeah, so we can basically, people can get added in different ways, as an invited expert or something like that. And then we have a separate source maps matrix group, which is not for delegates.
Anyone can. You don't have to be an invited expert.
What are the differences in your ability? None. Okay. Yeah. 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 No, I think that's a great call. I think that there's often this a bit of a misconception with open source in general, that it's there's barriers of getting in. And I think the reality is we're all drowning with work, and it would be awesome to have any contributions. And you don't have to go through the invited expert process. We have all this stuff on GitHub. We use Google Docs for our notes. You can come to meetings. There's a ton of work that needs doing. whatever would feel most comfortable. Like I said, like just writing some tests to improve coverage percentages or working on specification, anything like that. Yes. Yeah, so I think in order to get, changes to the spec would require like the IPR check or whatever. But I do think we have an immeasurable amount of work that could be done that I'd be very appreciative of, which is just like kind of helping us kind of triage, organize, looking at new features, helping review, things like that. Thank you. Cool.
You mentioned having to work together with the WebOAG for debug IDs. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so the original idea, I guess the idea that we're working with now is that when the, you would append this debug ID to the source map. And then, so that's like the easy part, basically. But so then when the browser throws an error or the user detects an error, how can we access that debug ID? Because you don't have like access to the, like a tool like Sentry, which is like running in JavaScript. It doesn't have access to the source map. So what they would like is some API, maybe on the error object, that would basically be like, can you give me the debug ID for this error? Or can you give me the debug, was there a source map? Like, we don't know exactly where it would live, but some way in JavaScript that you could like retrieve back that debug ID so you can map it to the source map that it came from, basically.
So that could be on the error object, which would be TC39, or on the error event, which would be what?
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out like where the best home for retrieving the information would be. I don't know, anybody else have any questions? Yeah, please.
Recently, in the last couple of Angular versions, the error stack traces have gotten quite a bit better. Does that have something to do with these?
I would like to take credit for that. I'm not sure. So yeah, the question was Angular stack traces have been getting a lot better lately. Does that have anything to do with the source map work? I'm unsure about that. I know that we've had a lot of good feedback from the Angular community. Like, I don't know that we've done anything that, I think, yeah, all right. Justin says unrelated.
I didn't know. Angular stack trace is really tricky for.
Recently, it's been surfacing the particular test file that broke at that line. A couple of versions ago, I remember it wasn't as helpful.
Yeah, I'm assuming they just added more to their, either more to their build tool or more on their like error retrieval. But yeah, I think unrelated, although they are participants in the group that we have.
We started working on Angular stuff before we formed the new TG. So this is much earlier than what we were doing. We started making changes to Babel in order to support English features.
Okay.
Maybe a year and a half ago.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. Any other questions? Cool. I'll be around all night, so if you want to come talk after the event too, I'll be around.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
thank you. So next is Shane Kerr.
Okay,
Okay.
can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
It works? Okay, cool. Great, so now we have I'm going to take a little tour of different parts of ECMA 402 and how it relates to the Japanese language. So, change my focus. There we go. Okay, so the first one is text segmentation. Makoto, you're in the room. Raise your hand, Makoto. Makoto is there. He's a little shy, but he's like the world's expert on like this topic. How you do text segmentation. So in Japanese, as I'm sure many of you know, like there's often not spaces between words, but like when you want to be able to, for example, double click on a word and have the word selected, even if there's other words around it in the same chunk of text, right? So this is a headline that I got from the newspaper yesterday. I put these little yellow bars to show like where the word breaks are. And like, this is an algorithm that like we have to have data for. And it's like, we're working on both a rule-based version and an AI version to do this, right? And like, this is the kind of thing that like, you know, should be built into your browser and should be used through the operating system. And ECMA 402 lets you do this. So that's the first example is text segmentation. Second example, I love this one too. So I got here yesterday and I did a little walking tour around Yokohama, and I saw this little sign in the window, and it says that this building is open from 07 to 2400, that's H24. It's the 24-hour hour cycle where instead of saying midnight, you say actually 24, which I thought was kind of cool. On the right here is my camera. I have a Sigma camera, and if you see me changing the time, it starts at 0, and then it goes up to 11 a.m., and then it switches to 0 p.m. Also, so that's another example of like the H11 hour cycle, which is also really cool. This is like super internationalization nerd stuff, right? Like these things are actually used, not super common elsewhere around the world, but they actually are used, so that's kind of cool. Also an example here of how to do time ranges with the correct characters to do time ranges, which is another thing you can do with ECMA 402. Japanese calendar, yeah, so here's the date, January 1st, and for the last 10 years, and for the first few years, we were in the previous era, and then we switched to the Reiwa era in 2020. I believe it actually changed in May 2019 to the new era. You can see the characters on the sign on the right. We started using those, and you start the counting back at year 1 is actually the same as 2019, right? And it started, so that's why you can't see a 2 there, but because the year started in May. So yeah, this is another example. You can do this with ECMAScript and also with the temporal proposal. Another thing, compact notation. I mentioned this a little bit earlier in the slides. Just want to bring it up again and show an example here. How it's very common in a lot of Western countries to group in groups of 3, but in Japanese as well as some other countries you group in groups of 4, which actually is more efficient, by the way. I love like it's a more efficient use of space, right? Like I think it's because especially if you don't have the suffix at the end, like it makes more sense. I think it's a good idea. I wish more countries did groups of 4. Okay, grammatical inflections. So very commonly when you write software, you have to think about your plural and gender because words and things modify by like if it's plural or singular, and also like masculine or feminine words, right? Like L or la in Spanish, things like that, right? So Japanese gives a little break there. It's not so much, but we have another different parts of grammatical inflections are different. We have honorifics in Japanese. I took this little screenshot from Wikipedia here about examples of how verbs change based on the formality and the context. So that's something that's sort of unique. We put it in the same bucket as like plural and gender in like a lot of European languages, but like it's a completely different concept. So having these kind of contexts is also something that we do. Vertical text layout, also something used that happens in Japanese. We don't actually do this on the web though. It is a little bit sad. Do we kind of do it on the web?
Yeah.
We can do it on the web.
You can do writing mode vertical RL to do text layout in vertical.
Yeah, okay. So in ECMAScript.
And fixed bugs related to that.
So in ECMAScript, we have an API that's coming out which basically is a Boolean left to right, right to left. So I would like to have a Boolean to be like top to bottom also works. Yeah, so that's why I say not yet in ECMA 402. So I would definitely like to see this. And yeah, I'll need to definitely do some more reading up on the other parts, other web standards besides ECMAScript. This is actually a great example for. I'll bring this back up when we get to the last slide. So this is another one of my examples. I have this charger, right? And like most chargers that I get in the United States, like have a red light when it's charging and a green light when it's done. But like in Japan, like it's a green light when it's charging and it's a red light when it's done. So like things like colors matter too. It's not just text. This is we use this example a lot in like internationalization, like intros, because like just to show that like it's not just text. When you think about localization, it's not just text. It's also colors and other layouts and other things. So this is a laundry list if there's things I didn't get to. List formatting, collation is really important. Relative time formatting, and just a few other things, a more comprehensive list. How am I doing on time? Well, I'm pretty good on time. Okay, I want to keep on moving through these slides. So coming soon. So raise your hand if you're familiar with the TC39 stage process. It's like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. Okay, again, left side of the room, all the hands. Middle of the room, I got about a third. So I'll just explain what that means a little bit. Stage 3 means that like this thing that we're working on is basically done, is basically ready, but we're waiting on browsers to implement it. There might still be small changes, but like we think this thing is pretty much ready. So like things that are in stage 3, typically it means that you might maybe in like somewhere between a few months and like a year or two be able to use it in newer web browsers. So interval duration format is stage 3. It's being shipped in Chrome and Safari, which is a big milestone. And we're expecting to put this up for stage 4 soon, not this meeting, but hopefully next meeting for TC39. This is how you can use interval duration format. A few other new things that are in the pipeline. This is the one I was talking about earlier about text direction. The direction here returns right to left and left to right. There was a issue to be like, should we also support top to bottom? And that's why I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit and do my call to action here, which is that like, this is the personal appeal here, which is like, we have a lot more participants in these bodies from like European countries, which have a lot of really interesting challenges. We don't have as many participants in these bodies from like Asian and the Eastern countries, even though like more than half the world lives in like the eastern side of the planet. So like, I would really love to get more involvement because like, as much as we try really hard to like make things sort of, equitable across all countries and languages, like there's a little bit of a bias for the people who participate in these bodies to sort of, fix the problems in the languages that they're familiar with. So by having more broad involvement, we can sort of, help close the gap. So that's sort of the personal appeal to people in this room, and I would like to get more involved. I'll give you a slide at the end with the QR code. So this is a locale info. Good info about locales, weekdays, calendar systems, and so forth. Temporal era and month code. This is another proposal that I've been working on along with my colleague Frank. You can create a temporal date in whatever calendar system that you like. This is an example. This is currently working in the temporal polyfill, which is kind of cool. So you can do this. You can create dates and convert them between calendar systems seamlessly. This is a big, it took a lot of work to get this to work, but I think we did. It's quite exciting what we were able to come up with there. Until message format. So I was telling you a little bit earlier about grammatical inflections. This is where I think we'll see a lot of that come to the web platform. The message format working group has been doing a lot of work, a lot of great work over the last several years to really polish this part of the specification. The syntax that we use for message formatting. So this is going to be finally a way for you to take your string bundles, which are currently in like a whole bunch of different weird formats, and like have a standard format that you can like actually like put in a string bundle and in a message bundle, and then like do your localization with the operating system, with the browser. So this is a huge use case. I know a lot of people are excited about this. It's currently a stage 1 proposal, which means that like, it's very early on in the process. So I'm hoping that, we'll see it progress through. There's some issues and challenges right now that we're sort of still working through. But hopefully we'll be able to see this progress. I know there's a lot of people really excited about this proposal. So I'm working really hard to get this one through. Thank you, Aki. Smart unit preferences. If anyone wants to cheer, by the way, like that's fine. Smart unit preferences. Another little baby of mine is along with Ben Allen. First proposed in 2020. This is a way for you to do localization of units. Right now, already on the web platform, you can say, I want this number formatted with this measurement unit, right? And it'll work. However, it doesn't choose the right one for the locale. So this lets you pick the right one for the locale. In this case, if you're an ENUS, road is going to be miles, so then you display it in miles. So that's an example here. I'm really excited about this proposal too. Okay, IC4X, almost at the end of these slides, but I mentioned this a little bit earlier about different ways to do internationalization. We're mostly here talking about the TC39 standards. There's lots of advantages of that. One is when you use Insol through the browser, your code is smaller because you just use Insol, right? It's all there. It's small because a lot of these libraries have a lot of data that they need to ship, so it makes your application smaller. The next one is consistent ITN across the same device. So we have multiple websites. You can have consistent behavior. It also makes it easy to do the right thing. That's why we focus so much on developing these standards. However, sometimes if you ship ICU directly, you have more control over app behavior. I see, especially big companies, and this may or may not be right, but big companies want it. They like to have pixel perfect, screenshot tests. And they're like, what? If I upgrade my browser version, my app looks different. Oh my word, right? So a lot of big companies like to have these, screenshot tests, and then they want to have reliable ITN. So shipping ICU is a way that they can do that. They have to pay for it in higher app size and bundle size, but that's why we have IC4X to make that a little bit better. Also, the ability to go to locales not in the platform, because you ship your own data, and then consistent behavior in the same app across devices. So this is just my little pitch for IC4X, which you're like, why are you talking about a Rust library? You're a JavaScript meetup, Shane. But the reason why this is important is because we actually are focused. It's a goal out the door of IC4X to be able to implement all of ECMA 402. And this gets back to what I said at the very beginning, which is that by making a really solid foundation in ECMAScript, we can build internationalization in other languages like Rust, and then we can use WebAssembly and source maps to do a really good job in ECMAScript as well, in JavaScript. So this is just an example of IC4X is great, it makes things smaller. Canvas Kit is a binary that does Canvas stuff, and IC4X made it smaller, so hooray. Call to action. Okay, here's your call to action. So here's the QR code I was promising for. This is actually to sign up for the IC4X mailing list, but if you go to did I put the link to our ECMA 402? Oh, here we go. This one here. I didn't put the link to the ECMA 402 GitHub on these slides. This is why I should proofread my slides a little bit better. But if you email this address here, or if you just search for ECMA 402 on GitHub, you'll find the page where you can go and get more involved with ECMAScript. And if you sign up for any of these things, I'm the person behind it. So on both the ECMAScript side and the IC4X side, it's the same person behind it. So these are examples of how you can contribute. We always need better documentation, including localization of documentation. But for new features, that's a really great way to get involved. It's very low barrier to entry. There's also lots of opportunities for mentorship in spec writing on the ECMAScript side, as well as in Rust code on the IC4X side. There's a lot of really great people on the team. A lot of my colleagues, both at Google and at other companies, are really, really great mentors. We all are really passionate about this, about making really good global experiences. So there's a really great opportunity there. And yeah, we also want, this is the bullet point I sort of alluded to earlier, we love to bring more professionals on board to bring additional perspectives and help us build libraries and APIs that are equitable for all communities and all languages and all countries around the world, because that's exactly what it is, right? So we should totally, focus on being more global first. So that's something that I would really like to fix. So please get involved. This room is the room that could solve my problem. Thank you. This is QR code. This is my contact info. I'm on social. You can find me on Blue Sky, Mastodon, and on X, which I don't check as often as I used to, but you can find me there. I'd love to take questions. I think I've been talking for a few minutes longer than I was supposed to, but I think we're still pretty much on schedule. So thank you all for listening. I have a question.
I wasn't sure whether to interrupt you mid-slide, so I saved it for the end, but you were talking about 0 p.m. or ranges going to 24. If you go to bars, actually it doesn't stop at 24. It'll go 25, 26, 27.
I love it.
It's a pretty amusing extension of a concept. Yeah.
I love it. Ross said if you go to establishments are open late, you might get 25, 26, 27 as the end time for when these establishments close. I think that's really cool. We only support up to 24 right now, but Nathan's, you see, like we clearly didn't have each 27, right, as like an hour cycle where before it starts wrapping around. So yeah, any other little quick questions before we take a break? Yeah, a couple of questions over here.
So yeah, it's not a quick question, but I've been wondering that IATM is potentially based on the side effect of the culture. So I mean that the country name can be changed, currency can be changed, and sometimes the MOA, the presentation can be changed by updating. So I think that so it means that the same code can be different output for 10 years later. So that sometimes that can be considered as a backward incompatibility. So
Yeah.
I'm keen to know that the standardization stance of that aspect by TC39 or Unicode or ICU implementation.
Yeah, so that's a great question, and I'm glad I included this slide. I wasn't sure if I should include this slide or not, but yeah, I'll repeat the question. So the question was, when people are using Intel APIs, people update their browsers, it causes behavior to change sometimes, and a lot of people consider that to be a bug, right? So my answer to that is, first of all, languages evolve, right? It's impossible to make an internationalization API that is always going to be the same because languages evolve. There's new words, there's new customs. So languages definitely do evolve, and that's been, foundational from day one with the development of CLDR and ICU, that these things can change over time. And that's why what we do is we focus on, helping developers. If you use the APIs the right way, then nothing in your application is supposed to break. Now, do things break? Things break when people use our APIs in ways that I like to call abusing the APIs. If they do things that they're not supposed to do, which is a little bit tough when you're in a standards orientation. It's like, well, I wrote this code. It worked yesterday. Why doesn't it work today? And the good news is that this is far in the minority based on the proportion of sites. Like when we test a new Chrome update, we'll test it on these sites, and the number of sites that actually break is relative to the total sites on the internet is extremely small. So most users, developers are doing the right thing. But this is one reason for the smart units proposal. I'm glad you asked this question. I have a good answer for it. So the smart units proposal here, an example for abuse of this, which was sort of a concern, is if we have this API as written, people are like, oh wow, I can do unit conversion with JavaScript. I can do unit conversion, right? I'm going to go and use this style function. I'm going to use the US region and to convert from meters to miles, and I'm going to take that string and I'm going to parse out the number, and it's going to work great, right? That's the thing we do not want developers to do. So what we're bringing this week to the TC39 is a new version of this proposal that is sort of a little bit more focused on the building blocks, so that if programmers want to get to this behavior, they can get to it in a way that won't break when locale data for US changes after we change all our road signs being kilometers instead or something like that, right? So that's sort of how we're focused on helping mitigate this problem. The other way, of course, which is what I mentioned a little bit earlier too, is if you really, really do need your stability. Traditionally, if you've tried to ship ICU for C, it's a very large library. It's very monolithic. It was designed in an era when software was shipped on floppy disks, and you want all your data locally. and it's very big, and it makes apps very big. Here, I'll actually go to the slide I was showing before. So this is Canvas Kit, which is a library that does Canvas layout. And I took the WASM file and I looked at how much it is ICU. So it needs ICU for only one thing, which is text segmentation, because it needs to do text wrapping on like the canvas. But almost 20% of the WASM file was ICU, which is like, it's not internationalization necessarily library, but like ICU is such a big chunk of it, right? So this is one of the, I made this slide, these graphs, when I was pitching to my leadership at Google, be like, this is the problem we really need to solve, and we can only solve it by building, an item library from the ground up that's designed for this type of use case. So if you really, really do need the stability, and there are cases when you need it, this is a good alternative that we have for you. I can go back all the way to here. So you can go on the left side, which is a standard route, or you can go on the right side. But we're trying to make both work. Same person does both, so same team does both. Great question, thank you.
I just wanted to point out that the browser itself uses ICU to segment work for line breaking in some cases. So unless you're doing the line breaking yourself, there will be changes there that will depend on how the browser updates ICU. So that is you could control that, but unless you really need to, maybe it's not worth all of that control. I don't know, make your own choices, but I wouldn't go that far to try to get the same behavior exactly.
Well, I think we have, I'm a little bit over time, but maybe just one really quick question if anyone has any burning question. Otherwise, I'm going to be around for the rest of this evening to answer any more questions you might have. But anyone have like a burning question to finish it off? Otherwise, I'm sitting between you and like a break, so I might go ahead and turn it back to the host. So thank you so much for hosting me and hosting us to come and give this talk at this venue. So thank you so
on
much.
panel discussion, we can talk about that. Yeah, it is. Internationalization topic is in the topic. Yeah, on panel discussion. So we can talk about that again.
Great.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
This talk. Yeah.
Although there's a place in the US I will not drink that water. True. We have
Okay.
suing people.
Okay, we can begin the talk. So presentation is more better. There we go. It's better. Okay, let's begin.
This is on? Yeah, okay, okay. All right, so I'm Michael, and I have been a champion of a number of proposals, but today we're talking about the concurrency control proposal. So here's some background. Is everybody familiar with the iterator helpers proposal? Probably not, right? Some people? Okay. A couple. I'll briefly, iterators, we have an iterator protocol. We also have an iterator prototype built into the language. It's not available very easily right now. It will soon be available just as iterator.prototype, but this is a place where we can place methods that all iterators that extend from it will have. Iterator helpers is a proposal to add new methods there. So we can like map an iterator, filter an iterator, that kind of thing. Iterator helpers is a stage 3 proposal now. I was one of the champions. It has had many champions over many years, but I pushed it over the line. As part of the iterator helpers protocol, we also originally had async variants of all those functions. So we had a map function for sync iterators, and we had a map function for async iterators. And at the time, we were just like, oh, this will just be a naive copy of the sync version. It's just, implement it with promises instead. But at the last minute, we realized it was important for async iterators to support concurrently pulling from them. So you can create 2 promises by nexting an iterator twice. And they are both doing work concurrently. And that would, and if you map over an async iterator, you want that to still be preserved. That if it supports concurrency and you map over it, it should still support concurrency. And that was something that was really important and was not possible with the really naive version of that. So we split off its own proposal called async iterator helpers. Now, as part of that, all we did was support, when you do a transformation operation, preserving the concurrency support. We did not provide any way to do the driving of the concurrency yourself. So for helpers that consume the iterator, like sum and every and toArray, they had no way to tell it how much concurrency to use. And that's where this proposal is. So this is a split from async iterator helpers to do that, to allow you to specify how to consume an iterator concurrently. So that's the background. So I'm going to go over each of our goals and how we've accomplished them with this proposal. This is a stage 1 proposal, by the way, so everything's not like set in stone, but I feel pretty good about it. So as I said, the consuming methods on async iterator prototype, we want to have a way to specify how concurrent they may be. So if we look at async iterator prototype, here's the consuming methods, toArray, for each, sum, every, find, reduce. We need to give them some sort of parameter, right? And we also want a limit transformer that can take a concurrency parameter and limit how concurrent the operations can be on it. So that's solving that first goal. But what does that parameter look like? So in a common case, we just want a really simple way to specify the concurrency of the operation, say like 2, right? Well, an integer solves that problem. So if we pass an integer as this additional parameter, we've solved this simple concurrency case. I want to do a sum where I have 2 pending promises at any given time at most, right? So I can just pass 2 as an integer there. But we want to solve it for more complex cases than this. What if I have a resource that is itself limited, but I want multiple operations to be able to happen to it at the same time? But I want that representation, that concurrency limit to be centralized. So like, let's say I have a network connection resource, and I can only make like 5 concurrent connections. And I want to do a bunch of different things to it, and I don't care how that's split up across the different workloads. I just care that at no time are there more than 5 connections going on at the same time. So how do we solve that? So this is what we're calling non-coordinating consumers, right? These are different operations that are happening, but they won't talk to each other at all. They just want to say, if the resource is available, I want to use it. So what we did for that is create this simple wrapper around an integer called counting governor. And the way it works is you have an acquire method that that returns a promise for one of these tokens called governor token, and the tokens can be released. So you ask for a token, it says either you can have it or you wait until the promise resolves later and you get it then. And then it never hands out more of these tokens than the limit that you've set in the constructor for that. So you create one of these, let's say, so in our example with the 5 concurrent network connections, you create a counting governor with the number 5, and then that represents that resource. And however many consumers pull from it, there will only ever be 5 that have a token at the same time. So that solves our oh, and then of course in these places, instead of just taking an integer, we take a governor as well. So you can have your simple case where you just say, like, I want to pass you a number, but you can also have a governor where you want to do something like share concurrency across non-coordinating consumers. And then lastly, we have a goal that there are some resources which have more complex concurrency constraints than just like a semaphore, a counter. So things that can like change over time. So we as an example, we have like resources that we have like anti-dogpiling features on a network request. So maybe you will start with a limit of like 5, and you'll back off to like 4, and you'll back off to like 3 later, and just over time these limits may change. Or there are certain services that allow you to ramp up in the number of like connections you make and stuff, and you can similarly use that. So we will have a generic way, call this the governor interface, where instead of just having counting governor, which is the simplest possible governor, we allow you to implement any kind of complex behavior you want behind this acquire method and hand out promises, in your own way. And counting governor just becomes a simple built-in implementation of that protocol. So let's break it down for this proposal. How would you specify your concurrency limit? Well, there are 3 cases you have to think about. If you just want really simple concurrency, you can just pass an integer. If you want that simple concurrency to be shared among many non-coordinated consumers, you can use a counting governor. And for more complex things, where concurrency can't really just be specified by an integer that counts up and down, you can write your own governor, which I assume will be rare relative to the other cases. Oh, and that's kind of just what I explained. So we've met all 4 of our goals in these different ways. We added parameters to all the consuming methods of async iterator prototype so that they can take governor and a governor and an integer, and that meets all our goals. And that went pretty quickly because that's all I have. Actually, I prepared this to be like less than 10 minutes. I think I might have hit that. Any questions about concurrency control? Or even better, feedback you'd like to give me about concurrency control, because it's still a stage 1 proposal and we really want to get like use cases that integrate back into it. Yeah, either of those. In the back.
So we had this whole discussion about governors for async iterators. Is there any reason to discuss governors and concurrency for just normal promises? Maybe I don't understand this deeply.
Yes, good question. So the question is about, are governors more generically applicable than just async iterators? And yes, there's a lot of overlap with other language features and other proposals that are in the works. I didn't really get into, in fact, I didn't get into it at all. There's like, we have the explicit resource management proposal, and it allows you to have resources that are like automatically disposed, and that we want this to integrate well with that. So like our governor's disposable, so can you use them with like using syntax? I don't know, if you're not following the proposal process closely, that might have meant nothing at all to you, but there are lots of cross-cutting concerns with this. We know of a couple, but I would love to hear more about that on the issue tracker, because I'm sure that there's a lot of things we're not aware of yet. And yes, I think like a generic promise integration or something is something worth thinking about. I also only yesterday have considered like that governors probably need to be composed to some sort of like product style composition. If you have like two resources and your process depends on both of them, you want to be able to acquire the composition of the two and not hold one while waiting for another one, that kind of thing. So we need like a governor.all. If you just promise.all acquiring two governors, you have a promise now, right? You don't have a governor, so it doesn't conform to the governor API, the governor interface, right? It means you can't just hand it to somebody who's expecting a governor. So we need something that like auto wraps that back up into a governor. Sorry, that was a little bit tangential. Other questions or feedback?
I guess governor protocol is the key of this proposal, and so in Node.js context or server side, they will require if developers would like to create more proper governor model, so they need to get OS information like CPUs and memory, stuff like that, I guess, and so they can control, yeah. But TC39 doesn't have these types of APIs, right? And so Node.js has so these types of OS APIs. So I would like to know about so how to corroborate the Node.js APIs and governor protocols. And
yes, I think this is also a good question. So the question is, TC39 would be defining this protocol, this governor protocol, but there's a whole ecosystem that has a bunch of APIs that like TC39 has no business touching. How do we proliferate this protocol, or encourage its use within the ecosystem? We don't have much of a precedent for that. There are not too many protocols that we've defined that are useful within the language. There's the iterator protocol, which is one a lot of people are familiar with, and I think that proliferated because we have a bunch of built-in facilities for using it. I think the more that we have built-in consumers of it and built-in implementers of it, the more that it will find use in the ecosystem. If you have other ideas for encouraging its use, I mean, we're really not a heavy-handed organization. We don't tell people how to write their code. We provide things that we think and have evidence for that would be useful for them, and then it's up to the community to do that. We can't tell you what to do. We can try. Is that right?
okay.
Oh yeah. Okay. That's real PC.
You say codes.
I can tell you something. Are we? How good are we on time?
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah, so currently it's okay. Yeah, 8:30. So.
Okay. Then thank you. Please, I don't have the links on here or anything. If you go to the TC39 organization on GitHub, you can find the proposal and open up issues there if you want to have these discussions, like the ones about promises, like generically being handled. I'd love to have that and just get feedback about what kinds of advanced resource management kind of stuff are you doing, so that we can make sure that your use cases are accounted for.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. next is a vast topic, and after that, the next room, the sushi is yeah, sushi is there, yeah, and so after this talk, we will go to next room, and we can eat sushi, and we can drink something and stuff like that, and we can talk on the panel on the next room, yeah, and with sushi, yeah. Is that okay? In a sushi panel, okay. I would like to share the. Oh.
various technical reasons. So ahead of time fixes most of the trade-offs of JIT, where you don't have that loading time because it's compiled ahead of time in advance of the user's machine.
I guess your mic is on, but I don't know why.
Does it work?
Work now? Okay. You can talk with yeah. This is also the mic. Yeah, so it's okay.
Yeah, so this is compiled on someone else's machine, the developer's machine. You don't have that risk of loading time. And especially when using something like WebAssembly to compile to, security risk can be almost negligible. So you might be thinking, how can you do this for JS? Because nothing like that exists. But my engine does do this, luckily. So just talk about test262 as the standard test suite for ECMAScript or JavaScript, where it's basically every single feature in the language. And I currently pass almost 50% of it. which is pretty nice, since you can see it's around 1.5 years old, but it's just gone, I guess, ridiculous recently, mostly because of funding, because I'm now working on this full time. Since August, I've been working on this full time, so there's a nice correlation there. And in terms of performance, when natively compiled, it beats most JS runtimes currently, especially regarding memory usage, because you don't need to have an entire runtime on compiler on the device or anything. And the other benefit is the binary size of the native compilation is tiny. Because JS runtimes like DNL just ship their entire runtime because they don't know what you're running. So that's like 90 megabytes. But with Pull4, because it's as if you're using Triangle Synfig, it's just 15 kilobytes. The other nice thing is because I developed the entire engine, so I have control of the entire stack. There's native TypeScript input, no transpile or anything. And it's also written in JS and TypeScript itself. And I will now attempt to do a live demo. So this is just a REPL, like enable thing. You can do any JS things, from simple to more complex, like the date API or JSON. Thank you.
Well,
yeah, so it supports a lot of JS things, also a lot of, it doesn't support yet, but like it has very basic promise support. Like you can just use them and things. Oh, I missed the bracket.
yeah, okay. No, top level already supported.
Oh, it's not running as a module.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, they're fun JS things. But if you can shout something and I'll run it, which I can't guarantee will work, but if anyone.
An HTML comment.
Actually.
HTML comment.
Oh wait. It might be because it's a module.
Oh, because it's a module,
Yeah, I use Acorn as my JS parser, so I basically got that compliance for free because I did not want to write a JS parser.
Class definitions.
Hmm?
Class definitions.
Oh, yes. This should work fine.
Yeah. Here is the
Private field.
Oh, private field should work. Oh, some weird output, but no, that's one of the main downsides currently because it's compiled ahead of time. So,
What are you compiling it to?
in this case, WebAssembly, but you can also do. So I just have a basic hello world JS file. And so you can just run it normally, as if it was Node or something. Or you can compile it to WebAssembly. And 60 kilobytes-ish. We can do a native binary. That's 16 kilobytes.
Depending on WASI API?
No,
No.
currently I use my own imports. Initially I did that because WASI doesn't really like UTF-16 stuff. But I hope to have, you can choose WASI or my own imports.
How large is Porco itself? You may have shown.
In terms of like file size or?
Yeah, the binary size for BRF.
Oh, that's just, it's in JS, so it's running it in with Node.
Okay.
Can you compile it with Proper?
Sadly, not yet, mostly because I like accidentally shot myself in the foot where I'm using modern fancy JS things. Then I have to support those to compile myself.
Would you be able to make like eval and the function constructor and whatnot work by like shelling out to Node or something?
Yeah, or I could, if it can one day compile itself, include it in the binary.
Right.
My hope is most modern JS things don't use eval, but
Does it support width?
no. Oh god. No, probably never.
How many tests are passed in test T262?
Sorry?
Yes, TC39 has a test cases.
Yeah.
Right? And test 262 is, so how many greens on a test 262?
I think in total there's around 50,000.
50,000.
And I passed like 47%.
Is it high or? Oh, okay.
Like I think, yeah, I think
okay.
V8 passes
We talked about it. Okay.
85.
So for many engines, there's a common API called Node API. So if you implement Node API V8, you can now use Node.js native files. Will Portal have any sort of input from Node API?
Possibly, I have native FFI as of like a month ago, which is nice for like if you're using SQL or something. Possibly, honestly, I didn't know that much about the Node API, like in terms of like binary things. Probably depends how annoying it is.
You might have mentioned this in an earlier slide, but so the bundle size is really tiny. I was wondering if you had benchmarks on the actual runtime performance between like a similar app and Node and
I have.
Yeah.
That's just a good benchmark which I found.
I did think I remember that.
Yeah, decent. I guess the main thing is because you don't have to worry about like jitters in terms of like how hot something is to compile, because everything, it's as if you did like eager compilation, like the fastest V8 jitter. But if you compile it to WebAssembly, it's usually a bit slower because it has that, I guess, like barrier in between. But with native, it can easily do like 2 times Node, which is nice.
I'm curious about your code split between TypeScript and JavaScript.
Yes, so the core compiler is in JS, but then all the because I have, I can probably share something. So all the built-in APIs like base 64 or something. Oh, that's the wrong function. So all of these are in TypeScript and then compiled with itself to WebAssembly. So you can vaguely see here with messy inline WebAssembly for performance. But basically every built-in API is in TypeScript, then the core compiler itself is in JS.
Would I be able to, the WASM it generates, can I use that in Node or browsers?
Yeah, you can. You
As like
just
a Word JavaScript bundle or something?
yeah. The only thing you have to, if you're doing like input output, you have to do some imports. But otherwise, you can just do like export function, then whatever. And then you can then compile that to WASM. Then you can just use that export. Oh. Yeah, and then it probably takes too long to download, but you can just use it like a regular WASM file, and then just use that export. Any other? No, I guess.
Okay, so to finish. So, okay, let's move on to the next group, the Skyrim B. So our dinner is served in the Skyrim B. もし変えられる方はここで書いてあってもらえる。パネルトークが一応あります。If you would like to read this component, it's fine, it's okay. But, so we have the panel talk. Yeah, I don't know, that's the section. Yeah. So we will talk on the Skype feed. The section.
一旦パネルのトークの方に移りますね。はい。じゃあちょっと一回切ります。 いや、乾杯してます。ちょっと待ってください。こんな感じでちょっと懇親会ムードあふれてる状態になってるんですけど、一応用意してきたものがあるので出そうかなと思います。じゃあ食べながら、飲みながら、Do you talk about panel talk with sushi and drinks? Eating and drinking is okay.
Can you let us know who's on the panel? Because none of us remember.
Piano?
Yeah. Do you have names?
Names?
Who's on the panel?
A panel. Yeah.
Because we all forget.
Yeah, it's okay. So if anybody has some comment or answering something, and then so you can jump on the mic.
We talk a lot.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we can enjoy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Okay.
Great.
Great. Okay. 大丈夫。I asked attendees to this question. Which proposal are you most excited about? どのプロポーザルに期待を抱いてますかって聞きました。いや、いいね。これみんな聞いてない。寿司食べながらでいいね。寿司食べながらやる。で、call this operator 6 body. Tempura is a 6 body. Pipeline operator 5 body. One is a fry, liquid and couple, and a blah blah blah. So yes, attendees comment. これが一応参加者のコメントになってます。で、一応それっぽく分けてみました。So, blue line is data for proposal. And I judge and temporal, promise you this is going to try, pattern match, module half. So, let's jump on to the discussion mode. So, data flow proposal. So, ゆくさんいます？ゆくさんいます？この全を書いた人います？はい。配達させてもらいました。これを使わせてもらいました。So, he wrote an article. Oh, sorry. Okay, he wrote an article, and so this code is from the article. Yeah, and so data flow proposal is really exciting about that. So I would like to ask about that. When introducing new operators, how is it typically discussed within TC39? I'm concerned that since the combinations of operators are finite, right? And, it might be challenging to add new ones. So I guess that is a bit hard compared to other.
That's a great question.
Great question. Any comments from TC39 members about this question? That's right. It's only that's right. その通りだって言われました。Okay.
So it's just that there's a finite amount of syntax space. So there's not a lot of choices for operators. And adding things that are English words creates grammar complications and adding things that are tokens pretty quickly, perhaps already gets to the point where it's confusing and it doesn't really, it's not intuitive what an operator will do. And we're just trying to, the proposal champion is trying to sort of desperately find a syntax that can work, even if it's not that great. And a lot of, I think there's a lot of tension between people who want features and people who want the language not to be a confusing pile of tokens.
Okay. Balance. Okay. 要はバランスみたいなことを言いました。プロポーザルの、追加っていうのは、ユーザーの、要求によって、起きるんだけど、それによって要求が起きることと、この有限の個数のあるオペレーターの数をどう調整するか、そこにポイントがあるっていう話をして、どんなに必要なら入れていきたいっていう話をされましたね。はい。So, I guess there are some JS engine implementators, right? And support for JS, so have you ever heard opinions from JS engine implementators regarding this? Are there concerns that optimization, such as J, might become more difficult with the introduction of new operators? Anybody has an answer? So JS engine implementers are there? Okay, here.
Yeah.
Few complaints about having to implement all that.
Pipeline operator とか
Something that you can do.
誰がマイクを持ってた
Yeah, I am not dealing with that.
パイプラインオペレーターとか、コールディスオペレーターとかのオペレーターを実装するときに、ジャスティンタイムコンパイラーが難しくなるとか、そういうことってあったりするんですかとか、JS エンジン実装者から見たときに、ああいうオペレーターの追加ってどう見えるんですか
Actually, I don't think that it makes something different because pretty much we can just prompt the type information or something we're running as we can just prompt right.
No.
Or you can just it's not the company's opinion or something like that, but my opinion is pretty much I think that it doesn't make the optimization hard. I guess of course it's pretty much we need to pile a lot of tiers and a lot of speculation or profiling or other kind of thing to make it optimized and probably it's much if the for example if the operator is taking a various kind of various fancy types this operator takes a string number between and other kind of things that we needed to correct the type speculation and type information and we needed to correct and we needed to optimize these things carefully and it would be probably harder compared to just adding a method and this method is pretty much specific to just begin or something like that but ultimately probably it's not so hard I guess.
心強い。
Very comfortable.
そんな変わんねえよって話でしたね。オペレーターがどんなに様々なその型とかを取ったとしても、バリアスタイプス取ったとしても、そこの問題は結局アナリティクスだったりとか、それを走らせたときにどうなるかっていう部分の問題であって、別にオペレーター1個が増える増えないに対して、すごく細かいことを言えばちょっと違うかもしれないけど、でもどんな究極のことを言ってしまえば変わらんっていう話をしてました。はい。よかったですね。はい。よかったですね。はい。じゃあ次いきます。インターナショナリゼーションでテンポラルの話をされて、話が結構上がってました。テンポラルについては、宮地見ようかな。
Brutal.
進捗seems to be taking a bit longer than expected.
Some of us didn't expect this actually.
How do you feel?
So if you pull up the agenda, it's online. Right? You can pull it right now.
Okay.
For this week's meeting, there should be a slide deck for update, like the latest updates about the proposal. So that will answer the question.
Okay. This week, tomorrow, so they will talk about the temporal stages.
It's not going to be stage advancement. It's an update. So.
TC39 はアップデートについて毎回機会で話すから、そこで見てくれ。So are there any brokers currently preventing process?
It's big.
It's big. Temporal is really big. So temporary がでかすぎるって。But so as a Japanese developer, I'm particularly excited about this. Those issues like time and locale are crucial and cannot be ignored due to the nature of the services we work with. So I'm really excited about that. Yeah. Yeah. So that's it. ちょっとなんか話したら微妙な空気になっちゃったんで、ごもっともですけど。So the next is module harmony. Any module harmony with the champions that exist in here or no?
Unfortunately, not today.
I imagine things have become quite complex at this point. Do you have any plans or ideas on how to approach the situation and where to start? So yeah, my understanding. So JSON module will be will be stage 4 to the.
It should be this week.
It should be this week. Yeah, or again, equal deeper will be upgraded.
It still has some problems like when you await on it, does the then triggers the module evaluation? So I think maybe or may not. There are still some standard problems.
So I'm feeling the most easiest one is JSON module like that. So it's not.
I don't know. I don't read news of it.
JSON modules is on the agenda for stage 4 for this week.
Yeah.
There's import to
Equal deeper is not stage 4.
No, it's also on the agenda for this meeting, but we're discussing some of these technical difficulties.
Okay, I got it. Yeah. So the last one is pattern matching. Okay.
Say something about it. Okay, so I'm one of the champions of pattern matching. About 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half, we thought we were ready to go for stage 2, and then we got some feedback, like outside the meeting, that we needed to sort of rethink the approach and develop it in a more iterative fashion. Even though we still would want it released all at once, we wanted to the feedback was sort of to build it in a composable way instead of just saying, here's this big proposal. And so we've been spending a lot of time working on that. And we are, as soon as we get a slide presentation together, which has not been done for this meeting, we will do an update, and then we'll see how everybody yells about stuff. And hopefully after that, we will be able to go for stage 2. But it's not yet clear how easily that will happen. But I hope it does, because it is a big proposal, but it's also very valuable.
ありがとうございます。Thank you. So, とても大きいプロポーザルだから、なんか、で、ちょっとずつちょっと進歩はしてるんだけど、いろんな問題があって、まだステージ1です。で、ステージ2に、次何かそのビッグイシューが解決していけば、ステージ2になるかもしれないけど、まだステージ1のままだというところでしたね。はい。なんか期待してる人は多そうなイメージですけどね、パターンマッチに。レコーダーのタブルだけ入ってほしい。So, my favorite proposal is record and tuple. Record and tuple.
Do know it's changed a lot recently. I can talk about it. Changed a lot.
So I am not one of the champions for records and tuples, but my understanding of their current status is that the proposal was for a new kind of primitive. And we got feedback from multiple browsers that adding primitives is very difficult, and they are not yet convinced that it is worth the effort. And so unless they can be convinced otherwise, or convinced that it will be worth it, then the proposal cannot proceed with primitives. And it isn't, if it's not a primitive, then you can't use triple equals to compare by contents, which is kind of the whole point of the proposal. And so it hasn't really progressed much. There's some alternative proposals that have been worked on to try and solve some of the use cases, like symbols as weak map keys, and the ability to customize the comparison algorithm in maps and sets, but those are still early stages.
I got it. So if we need to implement the record and tuple, and then we need to override our operators like triple equals, right? And so these types of issues are really big. So record and tuple is very hard. I got it. Okay. レコーダーのタブルだけ入れられないのって気軽に聞いてみたんですけど、気軽に聞きすぎた。簡単に言うと、レコーダーのタブルにはやっぱりその同じオブジェクト同士を比較するときに、そのオブジェクト同士が10日かどうかを比較するんだけど、その10日かどうかを比較する際にイコールイコールイコール、トリプルイコールに関しては、アップデートが必要なので、既存の動き変わっちゃうんだよね、多分ね。だからその既存の動きを変えるっていう一周がでかいので、今ちょっとなかなか難しいという話でした。ここから僕の力があまり。So, Dennis commented on some weakness. So I just read his top these weaknesses. So if TC39 member has any questions and any comments, so please jump on that. Please take my mic. So how to introduce features based on type information while TypeScript is de facto in the major development scene? Agree with that? Lack of common FFI standards. How do
I guess maybe it's a winter CG.
Yeah.
I do think it's a TC39. But I think possibly it could be a winter CG thing because there's more runtime than
Sorry. All supports FFI. All FFI をサポートしてるみたいなんですけど、これちょっと難しいですね。質問できる？どうしたいの？The next question is, the need to be backwards compatible. Don't play for them. これがまた難しい。
Yeah, so you have many
probably millions of websites. Some of them have not been updated since the 90s. And even in websites that are maintained and updated, you may have content from the early 2000s. I don't know, from something like a university website with that's hosting a lot of content. And this is not just JavaScript. This is the whole web platform ecosystem. And you don't want to break the web. You don't want to break those websites because then, no one told those developers might not be maintaining those websites anymore. Like if you're working on the latest, maybe you are, but there is a long tail of websites there that need to be supported, and we do break the web when the percentage is low enough. What counts as low enough depends on the browser and different I think we usually go with Chrome standard for that. But we need to be careful about that because we're changing the world without telling the developers.
まあ、これこそが Web のエコシステムだと。僕もでもこれたまに言われるんだけど、It's not weakness. I guess that is a strong point. Yes! Yes, ありがとう。Thank you. And the next point is, what types like result are misleading to many compatible user implementation? How do you feel?
Well, if you want to add things like results, then I think the implementers may want that because it can be implemented in the user land and they need to keep the engine small. So if, for example, languages like C++ or other Rust have a very rich collection APIs, like a lot of different kinds of maps, but we not have that in JavaScript yet. There was a proposal called the standard library, but haven't been.
I've seen your proposal, your slide, language
but they have no news for years, so I don't know.
How much drama do you want?
We just leave it to NPM.
I do think this is a really interesting space though, especially things in this category of where if the language has it, it can help with coordination throughout the ecosystem. Whoever submitted this, if you have examples of where this is causing real pain out there, you're collecting it together in one place. That's basically what we do with a proposal, right? So a proposal is just describing this pain that is happening. And I suspect that this pain is happening, but I don't have this data. I don't do as much web programming as all of you. So getting that together can make a strong argument for something like this. Jack is right that we don't want everything in the language, but for places where it's a really crucial coordination point, an argument can be made for it. This is still a possibility.
Just to add to something about that. A lot of the people implementing JavaScript and implementing CSS and working on the specification and on the implementation of web platform and JavaScript features don't actually do web development as much as you think, because those are specialized subsets. And I used to do web development, I don't anymore. And it's I'm getting more and more out of that with the web development community. So that outside perspective is very helpful.
まずいろいろ意見があったんですけど、一つ目の意見はユーザーランドで実装しているならユーザーランドで実装した方が JS エンジンがちっちゃくなるよっていう ご意見は1個ありましたね。それで言うと、確かにその意見もあるけど、もう一人言ったのは、どちらかというと、でも本当にストロングなオピニオンがあるなら、それについて反応があるなら、ぜひ TC39 に行ってほしいっていう話もあったし、いろんな意見はある。リザルトとか確かに欲しい気もするけど、ちょっとね、最近確かにこれ欲しい、あれ欲しいをたくさん言うと、JS エンジンがたくさんいろんな機能を実装しなきゃいけなくなってきて、それってどうなんだろうっていう意見もあるんだろうなとは思う。NPM とかタイプスクリプトとかそっちの領域で拡大できるんだったら、そっちに任せた方がいいんじゃないのっていう、ちょうどランゲージエボリューションっていうスライドが TC39 の今回トークのアジェンダの中に上がってて、その話はちょっと刺激的な話だなと思って言ってたんで、ちょっとどうなるかあれですけど、でした。はい。飛ばすか。タイプス。
You mean an official type checker?
I guess so. Yeah, and type checker. Yeah, I don't know if this is just an attendance comment. Ecosystem voices.
We have a frequently asked questions page on GitHub. You can find this answer up.
Yeah. プロポーザルにタイプスがあるんで、それ見てくださいって。
I can do it in person. You don't have to just do it on this.
一貫性のノンコンセプト APIs. Scripter would be better to supply the context. What is like so? If one scripter uses global context, and then the global context is
That's outside of our domain.
これはウェブだ。スクリプトタグでコンテキストを受けろってウェブですよ。モジュールインポート APIs がクラスになっている。モジュールインポート APIs、イコシステムじゃない。モジュールイコシステムがコンプリケーティじゃない。
The answer is ecosystem. It's the common JS interpolation is complicated. Other things are simple.
コンジュースとイクマスクリプトの共存に関しては、もうすべてコンプリケーティブになってるよねっていう。はい。なところかな。はい。じゃあ以上で、そのパネルディスカッションのトークテーマは全部終わります。はい。皆さん、寿司食べてください。So let's eat sushi more. Thank you. 聞き取れなかったと思うんで、いくつかまとめますね、後で。はい。なんか、最近更新してないブログとかにまとめるかもしれないんで。はい。じゃあ、ありがとうございました。じゃあ、これで TC39 JSConf のイベント終わります。お疲れ様でした。